designed as a program for civil society, which forms part of the EEA financial mechanism. And the contribution to Malta is from Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway as a fund. We were the NGO who submitted for the first programming period before this, and we bid to become fund operators. We never imagined what it was going to entail, as it's a very challenging and administratively burdensome on SOS Malta. However, with the objectives of the program, we feel that our contribution towards one, building on the capacity of civil society and giving space for civil society to grow within the objectives, because really and truly here we're talking about civil society and active citizenship strengthened and vulnerable groups empowered. And that is the overall program objective. And we will attain this through the projects and activities like Nuami and Amam are doing, through 4 areas of very important support: democracy, active citizenship, good governance, and transparency; human rights and equal treatment through combating any discrimination; social justice and inclusion of vulnerable groups; environment and climate change. ACF Malta shall also contribute to the achievement of the objective of the EEA and Norway grants, to reduce economic and social disparities, and to strengthen bilateral relations between Malta and the donor states. ACF Malta reflects the firm recognition of the sector's role as a fundamental building block of democratic governance, human rights, and social cohesion across Europe. So here we're part of a big European family. So our outcomes are very specific as ACF Malta: increased support for human rights and social inclusion, increased citizen participation in civic activities like the one we have this morning, enhanced capacity and sustainability of civil society. We know it's been very challenging for our project promoters. We have developed an online capacity building course, and as some of you who have gone through it, it is cumbersome for organizations, especially for smaller organizations. However, the Norwegian grants really want a vibrant, strong civil society in Europe, and this is why they are investing so much funding. Enhanced collaboration between beneficiary and donor states, entities involved in the program. Please do contact us if you feel there are areas within your projects where you can, and you feel you can make contacts with any counterparts or any experts from the donor states. We will help you to do this, and we will give you the contacts. Strengthened regional cooperation in the civil sector society, which is so important when we want to network, when we want to create more partnerships, and see and share our knowledge with others. We have a predefined project, which is going to be very, very interesting. And this was predefined after we had consulted with the sector. In fact, the program structure was the result of a consultation with the sector, where we had 2 stakeholder meetings with all the various NGOs in Malta. And the predefined project, which is going to be called, and it's going to be launched actually in a few days' time, I believe. It's called an Active Citizens Lab, where we want civil society, but also members of the public, to come onto this online platform and share their stories, share what they're doing, and share anything dealing with democracy, human rights, rule of law, and anything which is inflicting a reduction in quality of life for our citizens. So we ask you to become members of our platform, of the Citizens Lab. The website is now live, so I can put in the chat what the URL is, and please visit it because it's an interesting, new, innovative and creative way of how civil society can have its own media house. Very often we are left out with the important work we are doing by our local media houses. We have to run after our journalists, send in press releases, and sometimes we are totally ignored. This is your media house. It's run by SOS Malta. It's managed by Christina Abela, who's employed by SOS Malta, who is, you might all know her. She's also a journalist, a part-time journalist, does journalistic work with the Times of Malta. So we're really excited about this Citizens Lab. It is citizenslab.org.mt. So I'll put it in the thing and you can see what it's all about. Your events, you can actually tell us, put in your events on it, have discussion groups, and there will also be experts to be able to support you in any issues, in any problems, in any challenges that you're going to be facing. I just, before finishing, I just want to say how happy I am that you're using the terminology of single story, because we don't often use the terminology at all of the single story. And of course, the dangers of the single story, the perceptions, the assumptions, the conclusions and decisions, which are sometimes the wrong decisions and assumptions. So it's going to be interesting to see how your morning and this hour and a half that you have is going to evolve. And I think the definition of the single story needs to be portrayed much more out there for people to understand. And I'll end off by saying that SOS Malta ran a project which was called Youth Upbeat, where we had engaged 4 migrants, trained them to run workshops about their story. And they presented their story, they presented their culture, they presented their eating habits to the school children. This was a most successful project, and it changed perceptions by the migrant telling the story. So thank you so much to the SMITE project. It's an excellent project. I'm sure we're going to have great results with it, and all the results framework, which we all know about now, and all the targets, outcomes, indicators we have to reach will be reached through your project. May I wish you a really successful morning, and I look forward. I'll be here with you hopefully most of the time, but excuse me if I do switch off, because as we're going through all this Ukrainian crisis at the moment, and we're supporting the Ukrainians in Malta, I might be disturbed and we'll have to pull away for a few minutes. So thank you so much, Levi, and thank you, Nuami, for your contribution towards ACF Malta program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudia. I wish we were somewhere I could see. Let us give a hand of applause, but we can't clap on Zoom. So thank you very much, Claudia, for your time. Oh, I can see Conway's clapping, so we can do that on Zoom. Thank you. That was a great speech, and you mentioned some great things like the Citizen Lab, and which is something that we might try to also explore as everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And at this moment, I'm going to pass over the mic to Gabby, or I call her Gabby, we'll call her Gabriela, Maria Gabriela, who is the brain behind the SMITE project. And as a migrant as well, I think this project has impacted me. The story behind it, when she told me about it and when she explained everything to me, I realized it's something that I really enjoyed because we all have a single story. I think she, as the author and the brain behind it, she can just give us a little bit of speech and how all of this came to mind that she brought a great story like this. So thank you, Gabby. I'll transfer to you to speak, please.
Thank you, Levi, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for your lovely introduction, Claudia. This project is an initiative to combat social exclusion, discrimination, and hate speech by raising awareness of how perceptions and our attitudes towards each other are shaped by single stories. It aims to encourage critical thinking and stimulate a healthy debate through our story cafes that will be happening later on this year. And most of all, we would like to awaken the public interest and educate them in media literacy. The topic of this project actually was inspired by the work of the Nigerian writer Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I was introduced to her work while studying for my master's degree in transcultural counseling. The term single story actually refers to overly simplified and also inaccurate information about people, their culture, their traditions, but also of information about systems, sectors within a social structure. Stereotypes are formed from these single stories. And this project actually I specifically designed as an cross-functional, inter-ethnic joint project. And I am very, very happy that African Media Association Malta decided to take the lead on this project. And our journey together as project partners gives us the unique opportunity of cultural immersion to learn about each other's modus operandi, each other's way of thinking. And through our collaboration, we also encounter our own single stories we didn't even know we had. And to work on that, which makes it even more enriching because we walk the talk. With this, I wish us all a very fruitful debate, and I hand the word over to Levi.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gabby. I think we should also give another round of applause to her again. And I think it's a great thing to see that you had this in mind and to bring up the whole concept of this single story, which is something that we are looking forward to see how far we'll go with this and more, see how we can bring out the stories out to hear each and everyone's story, each and everyone's mindset on what that single story is. So without further ado, I'm going to try to let the panelists introduce themselves. I think we have Mariella, which is here. Thank you, Mariella. We have Dali. I think we don't have Dali for now. We have Mario. And then we have Gail, who's also one of the panelists, to introduce themselves. So please, you have a few minutes to introduce yourself, a few seconds to introduce yourself, please. Starting from Mariella, please.
You're muted.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. I am Mariella Pisani Bencini. I've been a broadcaster, mainly on television, for the past 35 years. This I've been a producer and presenter of an arts and culture program on national television for the past 28 years now. And it was always my mission, so to speak, to bring art in people's homes. I don't refer to culture because I believe that culture is a part of, an integral part of every human being. This is just the introduction, no? So this is me after all. 35 years of broadcasting, 28 years of on Meander, which is the name of my program, Besides that, I'm a mother of 2 daughters and a grandmother of 5 grandchildren.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria. That's great. At least we know you're a perfect grandmother. So thank you very much for that. Which I will get there someday too. Thank you for your word. And I think we'll give the mic next to Mario, since we have Mario on the line.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for inviting
Morning.
me to this very interesting panel. I'm Mario Gerard. I'm a social worker, and I've mainly worked in human rights culture as well, but from a human rights perspective and minority groups.
Okay, thank you very much, Mario, and you're welcome, and thank you for joining our panelists. And then we'll give it to Gail. Thank you very much, Gail, for joining as well.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody. I'm Gail Davono. I'm a forensic psychologist by profession, but like everybody else here, I don't have a single story. I'm also a humanist celebrant. I have 2 careers. I'm under the auspices of the Malta Humanist Association, and that is why I'm here today. So I'm also on the governing committee of the Malta Humanist Association. Yeah, that sums me up in a nutshell without any more details. Also a mother.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Gail. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we are packed with very great panelists. So we'll be having a good ride today with everything. We're supposed to have Dali, who is not here. I think he's running late or so. But without much ado, we might just go to the panel discussions, since we already know what our panelists are, so we do not take much of our time this morning. And in that light, I will give Conway, which one of the great people with us this morning, to present our first questions for the panelists this morning, so we can kickstart. Thank you.
Thank you, Levy. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here, and thank you all for your introductions. Basically, yeah, so we're going to sort of crack on and get straight through to the first question, or the first topic that we're going to discuss. And basically, what we'd like to start off with is to ask each panelist to tell us a little bit about what a single story or an incomplete story is to you. You know, what is your own perspective of what a single story or incomplete story is. Maybe we can go back to Mariella and start from her. You know, if you could just give us maybe 2 or 3 minutes each on this question, and then we'll move on to the next one. Thank you.
Okay, so there was a time in Malta when information given on television was considered as gospel truth. Any information was considered as the correct information that one had to adhere to, one had to follow. This attitude followed the similar, perhaps even more forceful attitude towards the rediffusion, which was the predecessor of the radio on the island. With social media and other digital means of communication, this attitude has now, of course, changed. Everyone's opinion counts as much as the next one, if not more. The man in the street is now ready to criticize, analyze, and come to his own conclusions about every topic, whether one is qualified to do so or not. In this respect, as a television broadcaster of, as I said, 35 years standing, I fully believe and endorse that information transmitted in any way, let's say on television, and I shall refer to television because there is an amount of control on the contents thereof, a control which is lacking on social media, I believe, a control which has at its roots an ethical and qualified approach, a grammatically correct approach. I repeat, I fully endorse correct and complete stories where both sides of the coin are shown and discussed, paving the way for a complete understanding of any given situation, provoking the viewer through images and words to think and enabling one to reach one's own conclusions through full understanding. So what are single or incomplete stories to me? First to spring to mind is the situation of the illegal immigrants, mainly from Africa, who after a turbulent journey eventually make it to our shores, asking, indeed pleading for sanctuary on our island. These people, driven away from their home country, strive to make a new life in Malta. The government, i.e. the Maltese people, provide them with basic necessities, food, clothing, a roof on their heads, schooling. In short, Malta at least tries to see to the resettlement, repatriation, and reintegration of illegal immigrants, of these people. However, more often than not, these people's stories are incomplete to us. We only choose to know one side of their story that starts when they reach our shores. And we ask, what is their social background? Whom have they left behind? Why did they have to flee their country? What are their thoughts, their feelings? What are their talents? What culture have they left behind and are carrying with them? Each individual story is incomplete to us. The individual concerned is consequently regarded as just someone who needs help in this particular moment in his life. It is a temporary situation. I think I'll stop here for now.
Thank you, Mariella. Mario, I don't know what can maybe give us your own thoughts on what a single or incomplete story means to you.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I wanted to start by a quote. I'm very inspired by Chimamanda myself, and I wanted to start with a quote from Ocean Vuong, who's a queer author. Language, like people, can be perpetually in flux. The words are, in a sense, bodies, moving from one space to another. Our very cells, too, are always moving. They are just overflowing and dying and being reborn. What is seemingly so static is actually constantly in motion. And I wanted to start with this quote because we are talking about the power of language and the power of narrative. And I wanted to kind of pick out another kind of idea from another author called Maria Pia Lara, who speaks about the ineffable and the unspeakable. My background is working on LGBTI rights, and I worked on my life with refugees and migrants, which my colleague here, Mariella, touched upon. And when we're working with these realities, we're obviously, and most of the time, talking about experiences which are very, very difficult to speak about. And often people are put in a place that they have to tell the story. And there is also sometimes a tension between the stories we want to hear versus the stories that people themselves want to tell. And this is where there's a tension, and sometimes there's a bit of an imposition, because sometimes we want to hear about how much a person was tortured wherever, versus a person wanting to speak about falling in love with someone in Malta. And there's not one that is more important than the other, but it's often what we want to look at. And I just wanted to make one last point, and then we can further discuss. There's also the importance of how we construct a story. There is very much the importance of what we are talking about today, the single story, and also how that single story is constructed. And we can craft stories to create peace, reconciliation, as Mariella said, to make people feel welcome. We can also, and it is often done, craft stories to perpetuate evil, to perpetuate hatred, to perpetuate exclusion. And it always boils down to narrative. I stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Yeah, that's very interesting. I think we've already sort of got two interesting kind of points. The importance of access to information, to different types of information, which Mariella touched on, and also this this whole idea about the power of language. I think it's obviously crucial to how we construct narratives in our own mind as well. So Gail, moving on to you. What are your what's a single story to you?
Thank you for that. By single story, I would understand a broad generalization of a group of people based on nothing but a statistically insignificant number of examples. So something can be as
Gail,
insignificant.
Gail, you might want to switch on your camera, maybe.
Oh,
Thank you.
is it off?
Yeah. Okay.
So now, thanks.
Okay, all right. Sorry, I wasn't aware it was off.
It's off again. Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay.
There you are.
Just bear with me a sec. Let me load my because every time I switch to what I have to say, it's just bear with me a sec.
Okay.
So
No problem.
okay, how about now?
Okay.
Okay, great. So again, I'm going to start again. By single story, I understand a broad generalization of a group of people that is effectively based on a statistically insignificant number of examples, which could be something as insignificant as them being pure coincidence, for example. So single stories, in my opinion, can either be completely fictitious or in fact incomplete. They are not the same thing. So they could be either be built on assumptions that go unnoticed by the person making the assumption, for example, as is the case most of the time. So say I were to be battling with something that angered me, right? When you crossed me. You observed that I was angry, you know that I'm part of the Malta Humanist Association, and you go on your way, right? The next time that you see somebody from the Malta Humanist Association would be online while they are debating minority rights, for example, which is a topic that normally generates quite a bit of anger in somebody who is an activist in it. So you think, oh, okay, humanists must be aggressive, you know. I saw Gail, she was very angry that time. I'm seeing this guy, he's angry again, or maybe you need somebody else. Who you think is only humanist, nothing else, and they happen to be short-tempered or angry or happen to be having a bad day. So you would soon conclude that humanists are an aggressive people. It's fictitious, of course, but were you to read a study, for example, that is representative of humanists worldwide, that says that there is a high rate of anger among humanists, and that would no longer be a single story. It could, however, still be incomplete, which is why scientists like to further their studies and explore their own findings in greater depth. So why are these people angry? In what situations have we observed them and recorded their moods, for example, for us to decide that they have been angry? Have there been situations in which they have shown the opposite of anger, say, before we conclude that they are an angry people? Chimamanda herself states that it's generally a question of power. The more powerful a group is, the more stories of that group you have access to, and the less at risk that group is of being generalized. So, for example, as humanists, there aren't many of us, so you're not going to hear of us very often. You're not going to meet us very often. So we are more prone to having a single story be generated towards us. Okay, we are equally prone to generating single stories ourselves, like everybody is here, of course. But that's the point I wanted to make.
Okay,
thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Gail. Yeah, I mean, I think it's you know, here we are talking about single stories. What's a single story to you? We've just had three different, you know, interpretations, if you like, three different perspectives just on that first, you know, on this first question. So it's a, you know, I think a clear example of how, you know, how complex, if you think, you know, think about it, the whole idea of understanding what a single story is and what is, you know, what is the topic that we're actually, you know, getting to grips with here. I don't know, Claudia, whether you wanted to add some thoughts at this point on to join in the conversation, whether you had any thoughts on, I don't know if you're still listening in at the moment, on what a single story means to you. I don't know if you're.
Yes, I'm here.
Sure.
I'm here.
I mean, if you'd like to add some thoughts from your own perspective as well, that would be great.
Let me tell you, my perspective is that we really need to look at the most vulnerable in our society and take up exactly what their story is. I think we don't listen intently enough. I'd like to take this perspective and try and understand and move away from perceptions and assumptions, which I think could be rather dangerous and rather misleading for a lot of us. I think here the media has a huge responsibility in projecting and giving us the correct information about what is going on. And I'll go beyond also the media. I will go onto our institutions, but also our politicians, who really need to give us the truth and not any fake news or anything which gives the story a different dimension to what it actually is. Unfortunately, we're having to deal with a lot of instances and a lot of issues, because now we have social media too, and social media is a free for all, quite honestly. And this is something, I think, which the single story is suffering and can also become dangerous. So I think, again, I will go to the definition of the single story and how important it is, not only for us as organizations, but also for the man in the street to understand what a single story is. How are we going to disseminate the definition of a single story and the dangers that a single story can bring, I think, also to society, not only to individuals, but to society at large. So conclusions can be incomplete. We do tend to come to conclusions, and I think the racism that we have, the high level of racism, the high level of hate speech, the high level of hatred within our society is all a question very often of the interpretation of the single story and reaching the wrong conclusions.
Thank you. Yes, I think there's obviously lots to think about in terms of how. Excuse me. Just fill that. So yes, so thank you all for that. That kind of brings us to an end the first section of the panel. I'll hand it back to Levi now, who's got going to take over for the second question for our discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much, Conway, and thank you very much all the panelists for chipping in on this. It's a great insight to hear your pardon of views on the single stories and talking about the social media, the migrants and everything. That gives us a very great perspective of what the single story is all about. Going forward to our next question, we were saying, okay, from a perspective, how can they affect individuals? Which means, how can the single story affect an individual or society at large? So I'll be asking that to all our panelists now. Probably you should give your own perspective. What do you think that the single story can affect individuals and the society at large? So in this case, let me start with Gail first, since we started with Mariela. I think let me reverse it and then start with Gail first, please.
Thank you. In my opinion, single or incomplete stories can do a lot of damage to individuals, regardless of whether they are created deliberately. I think they're a very fast way to spread misinformation, which is sometimes deliberate, spreading ill will throughout society, effectively. It also has to be said, like I said earlier, that many a time an individual is both a victim and a perpetrator of the single story. One does not exclude the other. And like I said earlier, nobody is immune. I think that a single or an incomplete story is what leads to alienation of groups of people, such as a race, a group of people within a particular age range, a group of people of the same religion, for example, or a group of people with the same political inclination. So yes, I believe that it does a lot of damage, especially from a psychological perspective.
Yeah, thank you very much. Stating that it causes a lot of damage in the psychological perspective, it's something that many people might be going through behind the scenes without even bringing that up to others, which is a great point. And then I'll reverse it now to Mario. So Mario, please, do you have a perspective on these, please? Your mic is muted, please.
So thank you. I think the effects can be terrible. They can lead to murder. we've seen in our own country several times. And we know that narrative had a part of that result, or seems to have a big part of that outcome. Of course, narrative has the power to go in the other way, the way of reconciliation, the way of healing. But narrative in itself is not neutral. It either goes in one direction or the other. I think what's very important in this, and on thinking on the effects, is what Gail has already touched upon, and who is crafting the story, who is telling the story, and why. And often narratives, and that's where social media can be dangerous, is when you have perpetrators or dominant groups crafting stories and using social media to go viral, essentially, with hatred. And this is not, it has an impact. This is not benign. It impacts people's lives and it leads people into action. I also touch upon what Claudia has already mentioned, and very much important, and stop there. I think it's very important to focus on the minority narrative. I'm inspired by faith. I'm a Christian myself, and what does Christianity really is? Really, it's just the minority narrative. It's a narrative that kind of destabilizes the dominant narrative beyond what one believes in. And I think this is what we need to keep on doing over and over again. See which dominant narratives are, which are the dominant narratives today, and disrupt them. We need to keep disrupting dominant narratives.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mary. I think I like your point of the dominant narratives, and I think we are also pointing on generally the aspect of social media. I think so. We are trying to see that social media has a lot to play in this aspect of single stories, which we think is a platform where everyone can speak whatsoever they want to speak without even caring about what's going behind the scenes. And stories are just being posted there just for you to have a tingling ears or tingling eye when you read the story. So I think that's a great point as well. Thank you very much. Then we'll go proceed with Mariela. Thank you very much, Mariela. Please, can you give us your perspective on this, please?
Yes, incomplete stories are not only associated with illegal immigrants. I mentioned the illegal immigrants earlier on. In Malta, which must be said has one of the highest population densities in the world, actually in 2019, out of the total population of 475,700 persons, 98,918 or 21% were non-Maltese nationals. Today it is said that this number has risen to over 100,000 non-Maltese nationals. These include immigrants from mainly Southern and Eastern European countries, as well as India, Pakistan, and the Philippines. Many a time, though these people live and work in Malta, their stories too are incomplete, creating a context where these individuals, in spite all efforts, remain foreigners, living in Malta simply to make a better life, which more often than not is centered around money. Work as much as possible, to make as much money as possible, not to become rich, but to send home to better the lives of close relatives, parents, and children. This is the part of their story that is evident to all. The other part remains obscure to us, creating a divide in society. It's them and us. Of course, incomplete stories spread also more to home. In this day and age, when time is so precious and so little, when the world has been going through and still is going through a pandemic, social interaction has reduced drastically. This affects Malta, us as Maltese, very much, because as a society, as families, we are very close-knit, we are very close, and this pandemic has almost, I dare say, changed our perspective of family life and and even friends. You know, it's become a different situation now for all of us. Individual stories are therefore becoming even more incomplete. As we say in Maltese, ma tafx hemm wara dak il-bib magħluq. This means that no one knows what goes on behind the closed door of every residence. Perhaps social media does in a way throw light on this, though I hold that social media gives vent to an individual's less admirable traits, where one might feel comfortable with one's face hidden safely behind the screen to express, unfortunately, maybe one's hatred, you know, or one's intolerance towards other members of our society. Incomplete stories are often associated with individuals who strive, in inverted commas, to belong, often combating indifference, intolerance, unacceptance. This leads in itself to a sense of non-belonging, to a life or a part thereof where one simply exists rather than lives. This concept of belonging, maybe I'll speak about it later on as well, but belonging is defined by American psychologist Carl Rogers as a unique and subjective experience that relates to a yearning for connection with others, the need for positive regard, and the desire for interpersonal connection. Later on, we will be speaking about what can be done.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marielle. I think you said some good points there, which I like the aspect of that. Migrants do not only consist of those from Africa, but it consists of the whole body from Eastern Europe, India, and I think that also gives a platform to say that everyone has a single story, irrespective of wherever you're coming from, irrespective of wherever you're living. You might not be a migrant, but you can still be someone living in Malta or in Maltese or a European everywhere, but you still have a single story. You still have a single narrative that people judge you based on that. So thank you on that and some other great points you made. We have Dali, one of our panelists who just joined us. So Dali, we are talking about, from your perspective, how can the single story affect individuals and the society at large? So that's the talking point we are on now. So it will be an honor to have you give your own point of view on that aspect. So thank you.
Thank you, and sorry for joining late. Internet connections didn't want to work. Technicalities, sorry about that. So for me, single story is super important. As we know, like media portray migrants in a certain way. And we speak about media in general, but also sometimes it doesn't help. They look for success stories, and also by kind of cause and consequence, it's like the other part of the story is the other part that's so like the other people, they are not successful. So we need only the successful people that we are showing you, and the others we need to push them away. We don't speak about the system that makes this person have a success story and this system that make the other one have a none, if we can call it like this. Stories are super important, and I saw through my work as an artist that storytelling is super important to reach people. There is a research that was presented in a hate speech conference showing that more than 50% of people that they write hate speech or they say hate speech or they act in street and things, it's coming from fear. They are afraid of the people in front of them. They don't know what will happen. And this happens with a lot of communities here in Europe. When we speak about the LGBT community, this was something that it's fearful. There is a documentary that happens and they spoke about being stoned in the street from people that they just don't know here in Malta, that now it's the first in LGBT right. So there is that fear of the unknown, there is that fear of change. But we don't see change from other part. So, and that's where the media portray of this kind of community is very important, because the change is happening in construction, the change in culture is happening every day. Like wearing the onnella, the traditional Maltese dress, it's not the migrants who removed it. It's a kind of culture progress that happens. But this change doesn't show in a way that in parallel. So the change is shown in the society, is shown in colors, taking picture, emphasizing on who is doing crimes, and these kind of elements, emphasizing also on the way how we treat people. So we kind of portray a whole community as a threat, and the way we see it as a threat. So we treat them also as a non-human. And like this, by consequence, that we kind of group everyone together in the same basket. So I said, like, through my work, like there is a project called Would You Like to Dance With Me? We went in Valletta with Copen. It was commissioned by Copen. And we went in the street of Valletta with a group of asylum seekers and migrants, asking people in the street to dance with them, using headphones. So only two people are listening to what's happening. And there is a story of the person in front of them are told. So the whole performance, it's a 5-minute, a one-on-one. And the reaction from the people was extremely shocking for me. Like, I didn't expect that people first will accept to dance with a stranger. And second, the reaction after. Some people were crying, some people want to hug, some people want to give their contact. There is a lady I will never forget, like she's super smart with her clothes and her bag and walking in the street of Valletta. And then one of the performer went and said, would you like to dance with me? And she screamed in the street and threw her bag, and she just like joined, and she was dancing and gave her like contact card to every performer. And she's like, if any one of you ever need anything, just contact me and I'm here. So stories change things, interaction change things, you know, but also all stories, as you were mentioned when I joined. It's not only one part of the story. Recently, like in the meeting with the Pope, there is a group of journalists, and one of them was just going from a migrant to a migrant. You, where are you from? And you need just to answer. How long have you been in Malta? And he was asking me this question, and I was like, okay, I will see where he's going with his questions. I was like, 4 years. And he told me it was tough coming here. And in my mind, I was like, okay, he needs to stop now. And I was like, yes, it was really tough. It was 45 minutes by plane. So he just left. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't, for him, his concentration is on the journey and how to kind of portray migrants suffering through this journey, but also the community is super diverse. And I wanted to just make sure that he get that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dali, for that. I think most of the stories you're seeing, I can resonate with that. I think you made the point, one of the points you made about someone being stoned on the street. I think I've been stoned as well with egg on the street somewhere around a skate park, standing there with a friend, and someone just passing the car and then stoned two of us with eggs for no good reason. So I think those are some of our single stories that some of us as migrants are going through some of those things, which seems crazy, but that's the life. So thank you very much for bringing those out, and I believe we have much more again to share with others. I think I'll just go beyond the norm. Is there any other person who wants to share something specifically on these questions. Let me just give another chance to one person to just dash in something so we can keep up to time, which is the perspective, how can they affect individuals? I think we had Claudia who spoke last time. We want to give another one person extra. So we just, if there's not, then we can proceed. Okay, if not that, then I'll give the mic back to Conway. Conway, you can ask our next question so we can continue, please.
Sure. Thank you, Levy. I think one of the, I mean, just to kind of give you a sort of almost a very sounds mundane, I suppose, idea of how a single story affects individuals. You know, I've been thinking about how single stories have affected my own perceptions of things, and this is, you know, this is kind of perhaps, as I said, a bit of a mundane example, but you know, I grew up in Malta with Maltese grandparents, and I had a very clear single story about the Great Siege. And then when you go to Istanbul, you kind of have that single story somewhat redefined, shall we say? You know, so even sometimes in little things, you know, or things that seem, you know, not that important, you know, it's so prevalent that you kind of build up these assumptions based on, you know, based on single stories. So, you know, no wonder that at a sort of higher level or a more serious level, it can be so dangerous, I think. So anyway, moving on. Yes, so our third question for our panelists is, I suppose, perhaps the toughest question to answer. What can we do about it? What can be done? Mario, I don't know, you want to tell us what your ideas are and what we can do about this?
Thank you. I'll start. Okay, thanks. It was lovely to hear all of you, and also Dali, who I will touch upon now. So I think what can be done is more stories, definitely more and more narratives. Stories from the margins, which Claudia mentioned, more stories from the margins, not, as Dali mentioned, not to position that person as the victim, but actually to empower the person and to challenge us and to confront us with realities which are theirs and not ours, and we make assumptions that need to be destroyed, essentially. And one thing that is very important, and once again Dali touched upon that, is representation. And even when we're working with so-called minority groups, we also tend to, you know, get 2 or 3 people who we like, who usually are, you know, people who look good on the media, and they become the dominant narrative within that minority group. And that's the politics of representation. That's very dangerous as well. So when working with minority groups, ethnic minority groups, whatever, diversity applies there as well. And even there, we need to bring out the diversity of the different narratives and the minorities within the minorities. That's about it. Politics of representation.
Great, thank you. Thanks. Mariella, your thoughts on this?
Yes, Conway, first before that, though, I'd like to refer to what you mentioned about the Great Siege. It's funny that you should mention the Great Siege and the incomplete story behind that too, because I experienced that as well. I was in London and I was speaking to this person from Turkey. And as you all know, the Great Siege is a very important part of our history in Malta. So as soon as I knew that this person was Turkish, I said, you know, I mentioned the Great Siege, which I must say a measure of pride and, you know, superiority. Because as you know, this part of our story is that the Great Siege was something, an event which the Maltese, together with the Knights of St. John, won completely. This Turk just looked at me when I was speaking about the Great Siege, just stared at me and had no idea what I was talking about. Had no idea, had never even heard about it. So I said, but how is it possible? Isn't it part of your history as well? No, he told me, I've never heard of it. So I think that's a very good example of an incomplete story, you know, and then how it affects people. Whereas for us Maltese, it's such an important part of our history. For this Turk, I mean, he had no idea it ever happened. So he must have never been informed about it, let's put it that way. And another thing which I'd like to refer to is to Dali. You said, Dali, that you've been in Malta for 4 years and that you are an artist, if I got that right. So that's another incomplete story to me, because I, who am very much involved in the art scene in Malta, you know, I pride myself on knowing practically all artists in Malta. Unfortunately, I have never heard of you. So do you practice your art here? Have you ever showed your work here? Have you ever exhibited? Is it just me, this part of your story which is incomplete to me? Or is it, you know, you've never actually, I don't know, showed us your art or shared with us your art? Maybe you'll answer later on, don't worry. Okay, so now let's see what can be done, right? What can be done about these incomplete stories? So in incomplete stories, rendering an individual an outsider at all times are the cause of the complete opposite of the sense of belonging, which I referred to earlier on. A sense of belonging which every person yearns for, strives for, and is fulfilled on achievement when gaining it, when gaining the sense of belonging. Indeed, one can only live a fulfilled life when the sense of belonging is achieved. I really and you know, very strongly believe in the sense of belonging. One really has to feel the sense of belonging to be able to live a good life. Living in one's native country, speaking one's mother tongue, sharing and participating in tradition and culture, interconnecting with people, with other members of the same society, understanding the mechanics of society, its cultural, artistic, traditional, political, religious aspects. These are all elements which contribute greatly towards a sense of belonging. The other side to this coin is acceptance and approval by society to create the sense of belonging in whoever is trying to achieve it. In today's global world, information, communication, technology, lifestyles are bringing people together. People with diverse interests, concepts, cultures, thoughts, who also need to embrace this conceptual system of belonging. And also, as an art historian, I believe that even through art, which is communication in itself, which has no boundaries, through art, this sense of belonging can really be achieved. We mentioned Dali here, living in Malta. You know, if we could experience his art, art which is in reality, you know, it's the expression of one's innermost feelings and innermost sentiments. It's a reflection of the person. It's a reflection of the person's culture and the way of the society he was brought up in. So art will bring us together. You know, art. I always think about going back to the illegal immigrants here in Malta, because other immigrants might have the possibility to somehow or other foreign residents here in Malta might have the opportunity to share with us their art. But I always wonder, you know, through these illegal immigrants, who knows how many of them are artists, are musicians, are writers, and we don't know about them. We've never discovered them. Why? Because we don't know their story. Their story is incomplete to us. And if, as a society and as individuals, we maybe go out of our way to try to discover the talents these people have, the arts they practice, or which they used to practice, maybe. Who knows what we might discover and how complete their story will become to us. And when we look at these people as people, who are contributing to society in one way or another, then they become a part of society and they become more accepted by everyone concerned. That's it for now.
Right, thank you. I don't know, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, because my home internet's gone out, so there seems to be a few gremlins around today. So I'm on my phone now. So unfortunately, I missed a bit of that, but thank you, Mariella. I don't know, Gail, if you want to take over now and tell us what your thoughts on what can be done about this.
Sure, I agree completely with what has been said so far, and of course what I prepared is similar. I believe that the best protection against single stories is education, both in the acceptance and in the celebration of differences, and of course in critical thinking. We don't really need to look very far. We could look inwards and reflect on what we could do to stop single stories from taking root, for example. But on a larger scale, I believe that the media should be held accountable, both for what they write and also for what and who they publish, rather than rely on vitriol and cheap or false rhetoric to attract viewership or readership. They could take a stand against such rhetoric, in fact, most especially if it is not proven to be true. Not all media houses do, I'm afraid. Rather than take everything at face value, we ourselves, we could all do a bit of research, for example, about how these stories came about. One of the most poignant messages I heard Chimamanda deliver was that if you started the story from the middle of it, the meaning would be changed. So she said, if you started the stories of colonialism, for example, with African continentals firing arrows, the meaning changes from where your story to start with European ships landing in shores with white people coming off them and claiming land. Conway and Mariella also made reference to the Great Siege in much the same way. There's a different Mariella in a very true manner said the text don't even hear about it, but history is written by the victor. So it's very common for different countries in the same war to have different stories of it. But I think the best way to beat the single stories is tell more stories. The more stories there are, the more perspectives there can be. So I let it not only be effectively the powerful and the already privileged who are talked about, because they don't need it as much. And lastly, I think most importantly is that we realize that there is not a single story about anyone, any group of people. If we started from there, then automatically a flag will go up when you hear a single story, and then it's easier for you to be critical about what you are hearing. And as a final thought, those of you who have read *Sapiens* by Harari would realize how absolutely futile and trivial all this is, the separation between races and different types of people, and how in fact how common we how much we have in common as a race, and how small these differences are as well between one group of people and another. So I think that is also important to keep in mind. We think we're so much more important than we are as a species, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. I think one of the things that's interesting about the whole, the whole media perspective, from my point of view, is that social media, because it creates these sort of echo chambers. Mariella at the very start said, TV used to deliver a message, and that message was the gospel truth. I think now it's almost worse now. There's a sort of you're in your echo chamber on the social media, and that's the gospel truth. And you see all these conspiracy theories, not just in terms of migration, but around everything, politics, all sorts, economics. There are all sorts of kind of silos being created, which I think are a real problem for us all. I think we're all aware of that. How we're gonna change it is going to be a to be the challenge of our time, I think. So moving on, Dali, your thoughts on what could be done?
I think I'll continue speaking about, you spoke about social media. Social media is a place of algorithm. So if you are already converted and I advertise a video about migration, you will see it. So we are going like more and more into a virtual kind of reality that it's also destroying, that it's showing us that everyone is good. When we enter to our personal Facebook, sometimes we see something that like all the friends are liking the same things and are like kind of converted to what our values and principles are. However, there is a whole reality outside in the street that is super different, that advertisements on social media and on virtual platforms don't reach. We said that there is that fear of meeting the person, and we are missing this. Most of the story that we are telling are videos. Most of the stories that we are telling are seen by thousands of people that they put like and they pass and they forget it the next day. There is no human interaction with stories. There is no kind of link to the person on a human basis, seeing, touching, speaking to the person, asking question afterwards, after the story, getting like this opportunity. When I said just like 4 years in Malta, I am an artist, Mariella asked a lot of questions. If I said this in a video recording and they went, maybe she will never see me and ask me these questions. So I think what needs to be done is creating spaces of these interactions. There is the Refugee Week Festival that is coming up from the 20th to the 26th of June. I have also a work that will be shown there. And ironically, I'm creating a video installation, but we were taking this video installation through Kazins, through different exhibition spaces. And we are asking people to ask questions, to give feedback, to interact with the work, not only because I'm not available, so I cannot perform it every time. So at least they connect with the work. And then if they want to really discuss, there is a day where the artist will be there, where the storyteller and the one who is telling his story will be there, and you can interact with them. I think these spaces are very important. We are creating an invisible community in Halfar when we speak about irregular migrants, asylum seekers, refugees. We are creating an invisible community, and by showing a video of one person, it doesn't change. So yes, a lot of stories, keep saying stories. It's not one or the other, but also it's both needs to happen, especially like in a post-pandemic. Hopefully we are saying post-pandemic, but we still, but in a post-pandemic world, we need to kind of rehumanize the people, rediscuss people in different ways. You know, I was like hearing the news while the Pope is here and the discussion that it's happening, you know, it was like half awful, the discussion that is happening on TV about migrants and who are the migrants there, what are the kind of people, what kind of stories and what kind of, and why he's visiting is kind of, it's an interpretation of what the people speaking on the TV, because I was just listening, they kind of interpret what is happening, but the people's story is not, it's not on stage, it's not on that platform to kind of give one voice and the other and have that discussion. Some people, like for example, my Maltese friend, we always like kind of bring some political discussions and things, and we discuss about Charabank. And Charabank is like, it's not a debatable place, like it's a shouting and things place, but at least it's brought some subjects. It brought on the table a subject that usually it's not discussed, and they bring two people from both sides and give them the floor to discuss and let people judge. These opportunities as well, it's missing to kind of have the interaction of this. Finally, like we tend to kind of summarize, we tend to create a story, publish it, and then people will go and kind of identify what is the points that they want to focus on, create a whole other interpretation on it, you know, and kind of publish it. And they will be the holder of the truth. And the other person cannot respond because it's pre-recorded and it's done. So I think it's very important to create spaces where the interaction is happening, where also sometimes it needs to be pushed in a way, like encouraged, and empowering a community is super important to get these spaces working. Because if the community are thinking about ID Malta and going tomorrow to ID Malta, will never think about going to an art festival. You know, it's something that it's a least problem to have. But I think both things need to happen at the same time.
Great, thank you for that. I mean, I'm thinking, I don't know, I mean, I can't, at the moment, I can't see everyone who's on the call at the moment, but I think, you know, this idea of spaces and opportunities to interact, to learn from each other, I think is, you know, is vital, absolutely vital. I mean, I think, you know, we've all had personal experience of our preconceptions being taken apart by interaction. You know, it's happened to us all. It's inevitable. It's a part of the human sort of, you know, human experience. You think something, and then when you interact with it, or you interact with that person, or you interact with a sort of, you know, with an environment that you're unfamiliar with, or with people you're unfamiliar with, you know, it immediately changes your views on things. So, yes, I think that's clear. So, in terms of the questions, you know, that we had pre-prepared for the panel, that brings us to the end of those pre-prepared questions. Levi, if you don't mind keeping an eye of managing the Q&A, because I can't see this on my mobile, everyone. So we can go now to a Q&A. If anyone on the call has any questions for any of the panelists, you know, please feel free, or wants to share their own thoughts on what we've discussed so far, please feel free to put your hand up or interject.
Yeah, Conway, thank you for that. Thank you for giving me the utterance. Please, so if we have anyone with any story or the question, please.
Mario, may I ask you, first of all, thank you very much to all the panelists for your very valid contributions. I would like to ask you, Dali has brought up some very interesting points. And I would like to hear from you a little bit in this regard. I mean, to create active spaces, and to how can we help that in visits like this, people are represented, their voices are heard.
Thank you. I'm fully support Dali, and I'm very inspired by what he said and by his arts project. I also was inspired by the interaction between Mariella and Dali, because it is about the spaces we inhabit, because I know Dali personally and I'm very familiar with his art. It's not about, it just means where we're located. In liberation theology, we say we think with our feet, we think where our feet are. And it often boils down to that. My thinking, my interpretation of the world depends where I am planted, the spaces that I'm inhabiting. And Dali is pointing exactly towards that. How do we create these other spaces that mediate the interactions that never happen. I'm not saying this from a place of judgment. If I'm working now 5 days a week from Valletta. A few months ago, I was working 5 days a week from Hal Far. It changes me simply by the geographical location. I'm not seeing now what I was seeing in Hal Far. As simple as that. And this is where Dali inspires me a lot. And this is where I'm very inspired by his project. And also going into spaces like he mentioned, the Kazin, perhaps finding new things and perhaps finding that we were making assumptions about those spaces that were wrong as well. When I was in Hal Far, I was buying F-Tira from a kiosk there, and I was very pleasantly surprised by the interactions of mostly men around this kiosk, which were in many ways inspiring. And they managed to overcome certain assumptions from both sides simply by buying one cigarette or buying a F-Tira or joking or passing a comment, whatever. As you know, I'm like Dali, quite queer and effeminate, but in that space, most of the Maltese men there had their Verdun, or they had their bird. My father was a bird trapper, so I know a lot about Sweden, Griedel, and catching and trapping birds, which I don't like, but my father did. So I managed to engage with these men, told them, you have a nice Verdun there, you have a nice bird. And they're like, how do you know about these birds? I'm like, well, actually, I know a lot about them. And I think it's about, this is what Dali is saying, is overcoming the barriers, overcoming the assumptions, looking at Dali or looking at Mario or looking at Gabriel and saying, oh, Mario is like that. And well, actually, Mario is, like we've been saying, not a single story, a lot of things. I just wanted to provoke you a little bit, all of you, with just one more thought. And I'm picking up a thought from another author called René Girard. And he says, and I agree a lot with him, we actually fight because of similarities and not because of differences. Actually, the conflict happens to create differences. What we're afraid of is similarity, the space where there is no differentiation. And if we look at wars, even ethnic wars, you see this. The war, the Habesha communities, the war now happening in Russia and Europe. I'm not saying there are no differences. I'm not saying that there's no perpetrator and there's no victim. I'm just adding another story to the complexity of it. But I do believe that Girard has a point. We do fight because of similarities, not because of differences. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mario, for that. That's a great insight. I think I'll also share a little bit story about myself. I think I told Gabby about this story the first time I met Gabby when we were discussing about the whole framework. I went to an office one day and someone in the office, a big person in that office, and he was talking to me. And when I started talking, he was like, hey, your English is good. And I was like, my English is good? What does that mean, my English is good? And I was surprised, probably my type, if I may say, is not eligible to speak good English. So it was baffling to me to hear that someone could say your English is good. And I was astonished when he said that, and I was like, okay, I never really cared about that. But it pondered in my mind all through that day that what do you mean my English is good? And it has been something that has been ringing in my head all through my stay here in Malta for the past 5 or 6 years. So I could relate with things, with stories like that. So great one, Mario and Dali, thank you. And great question, Mario, Gabi, sorry. I know Gabi is the easiest name for me to call you, so sorry for that. Yeah, I think there are some hands up. Claudia, hand is up for a question, please.
Yeah, let me tell you, as much as I really agree with spaces, spaces exist. Are we being inclusive enough? Are we including minority groups and the single storyteller to come into our spaces? And inclusion is a two-way process. It is not a one-way process. So we all have to make an effort for these spaces. We are a multicultural society today. So what we are projecting on our screens, what we are bringing to social media, what we are bringing to our schools in education needs to be multicultural. They need to read multicultural. They need to listen to multicultural. They need to absorb multiculture. So here I think, yes, spaces, but I don't see why Dali should make his own space. He can come into the spaces already, and we need to include him. How much is our television bringing the minority groups to our sitting rooms? We don't have any commentators. We don't have discussions with Black people in our television studios. Why was the Pope's visit and the very important meeting, migrant event, not discussed with migrants on television? And only Maltese were discussing. Why are we not bringing the perspective? And to change perceptions, we need to interact. Another word you've used so much. We need to interact. And when we arrive in Malta, are we interacting with a multicultural image? When we arrive in Malta, does our police force reflect a multicultural image? Do our teachers reflect a multicultural image? These are all very important spaces for our societies to grow and for our societies to start really absorbing the stories and the historical stories that, I mean, our culture is going to have these historical stories in years to come. So we need to interact. And this is what worries me personally, but I'm sure it worries a lot. We do not engage enough with minority groups. When we talk not only about migrants, there are other minority groups that we don't give a voice to and we don't include in our spaces. Let us look also at the people living in poverty. How are we interacting with the people who are living in poverty? Where is our solidarity? Where is our social solidarity pillar? And the values, the Christian values that have been embedded within our society. So I think, you know, this is my message today to you, really and truly. The spaces are there. We need to include the minority groups into our spaces and be part of who we are. I mean, Mariella, after this session, I'm sure you will invite groups and from, you know, Dali himself to come and show himself on the box.
Yes, by all means.
You know,
I'm dying.
has, you know,
I'm dying to get to know Dali's art, really.
And also the musicians. There are some wonderful musicians and all the intercultural philosophy that we all have to embrace is amazing. And the richness of diverse cultures, even at the workplace, is something which I have personally experienced and which brings a totally new dimension to how we work, how we engage, how we absorb the knowledge we are sharing. So I really believe that the storytelling, the single story, is so important to bring out there. But our communication channels need to be communication channels for good. And that is what we need to do. Let's use digitalization for good. Let's not embrace fake news. Let's not embrace the truth, and let us get to know the people who are going to enrich our lives.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Thank you very much for that insightful take on this. I think Gail's hand has been up for a while, so okay.
I don't know.
It was covered already, so.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Conway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether you know, this isn't really a question for anyone specifically, but obviously, you know, feel free to jump in. This thing about, you know, we need to tell stories, or we need to be proactive ourselves, and we kind of need to, you know, we need to counter it by thinking about, you know, the way we project ourselves and the things our own contribution to the social media debate, if you like. I think the big problem there is that you're competing against people who are sort of very committed, very one and very organized. I mean, I think this, when thinking even about conspiracy theories, there are these groups of very passionate, very driven, well-resourced, people who are pushing these narratives for their own particular agenda. And it always seems to me to be an almost impossible task to counter that. And I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on how do you counter the well-resourced single story narratives that are pushed out by governments or by powerful organizations. I mean, Mario was talking earlier about or someone was talking about the dominant narratives. You always hear the dominant narratives. What can you do? What can you do about that? Yes, that's what we should be countering those narratives, but really, it would be good to hear people's thoughts on practically, some practical thoughts on how we might be able to do something about it, really.
Conway Gail, earlier on, she gave a very practical solution and also a hint that we need to bring our stories out. It's the more stories, the better they are. I mean, if silence, if we break our silence and bring stories out, so because it is a power issue. I mean, you can break the power by learn to stand in your own power and bring your story out as well as many other stories. For example, our project, for example, is a practical step. Is a practical step to raise awareness, even a start to raise awareness of the power of single stories and to understand what is it all about. And I'm sure as we participate, as we listen, as we think, something is shifting already, you see? Or for example, when we discussed about presentation, about art, about culture, and Claudia said, I'm sure Mariella will invite another population, will include, and Claudia spoke about inclusion, portraying the multicultural picture. There is where we need to start. Gail has her hand up, Dali has her hand up, his hand up.
Yeah.
Mine was an answer to Conway's question. I was going to say, Conway, you beat it one answer at a time, one story at a time. It's not just minority groups, effectively. It's also when you are, for example, in another of my capacities is I'm chairperson for the Malta Chamber of Psychologists. I'm the president, so I'm often required to give my opinion on things which I would normally probably prefer to stay silent on rather than arguing in public. And the reason being is because I know that there is a vast rhetoric on some topics that is the dominant rhetoric and that they are far more resourced than I am, but I cannot in good conscience stand there and agree with them. So I have to show up because I have to, it's part of my role. And I stand there and I state what I need to state and I state my reasons. And I hope that at least what I have to say is falling on somebody else's ear, only to make them think critically, not necessarily to convince them to think the way I do. But that is why I said, and that is where I answered the question of what should be done with education and into acceptance and critical thinking, because I think that would really help, not just for this in this case. I think that as a nation in general, we do not think very critically, and social media is bringing that out of us. You read one story, and if it's not April Fool's, you don't question it. Ironically, on April Fool's is when you question everything. But if it's not April Fool's, you don't question what you're reading. You just think, oh, if we taught critical thinking, perhaps on a national level, to even our younger students, I think that would make such a difference to our society on so many fronts, but this front included. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gail, for that. That's also very well insighted statement. Thank you. I think I'll give the chance now to Dali, please.
Um, I wanted to emphasize the idea of the two-way system that Claudia mentioned. It's not only from one part. If the other part don't agree to be included, it will never happen. A story that my kind of personal story, when I came here for a project, for an artistic project. I found myself in an artistic scene, people who are already converted and they are supporting my decision to ask for asylum. They became friends, they became a support system to me. These people, when I started working, I found a boss that she was super supportive, and I'm renting her house now. And she invited my parents to come to Malta to see them after 2 years. Also, when I started MCAST, I found a group of colleagues that are supportive, that are discussing everything, but also the lecturers, that are trying to find a way to kind of, when we discuss some things that stipend, for example, when I say I don't have stipend and we do a fundraising for our projects, they would give me more than they would take because they know that I don't have that support. So if I didn't have the chance to enter these communities, I will never have the chance of this support. I will never have the chance to understand also the different things, to be an activist within an organization, to understand the Maltese system, to understand the Maltese laws, to understand this whole kind of image, to know people, to walk in the street and be hi, 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 go for a hike and be like, I will be alone today. And then you meet someone you know, to have this rich kind of community that becomes a sense of, when I speak here in Malta, I say we, as like, in Malta, we do this. So it doesn't become something that is strange. It's home. So yes, the spaces exist, but the spaces are targeted as well. So when we speak about spaces as where migrants kind of go to, are spaces that I will never think about going to, like in the mind of other people. When you think about a space, for example, that it's kind of, we speak about Kazins, and there is, like, for example, the video of Karim that you showed us in the political conference, political rights conference. Karim in Bezabuja in the Kazin with the festa going out and these kind of things, and the video that they created is like speaking about him being included and being part of the community. It's not anymore a question to ask. It depends on the person, but also we need to show that these spaces that exist are open to people to be, but also we need at the same time working on rights, advocating, changing ideas, but at the same time empowering the community. And by empowering the community, I mean by explaining what is the need of doing this? What is the need of going out of that work, home, work, home, work, home until you are exhausted? What is the need of today, for example, you decide just, even if you don't speak English, to go and watch a film, just to occupy the space, just to show that there is a Black body in a space that meant to be, that doesn't meant to be like that in the society's mentality, I said an example once in one of a panel discussion that, like, we decided, like, we always hear that clubs are discriminating against Black individuals and things, and we just grouped ourselves, 8 people from different countries, one, like 2 Tunisians, Jordanian, Malian, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, and we went together to a bar. We were the spot of everything, it was nice. So it's like, let's occupy these spaces. Let's go. It's not of taking over. So we don't create that idea of like conspiracy theory. It's just let's be represented in different spaces. Let's see this diversity happening, not only in Hamrun, not only in Marsa.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nali. Also a great point. Yeah, we need to make good use of those spaces as well, and then enjoy that as well with everyone and share the same thing. I think one of the things also we have to make point is, even if we need to hear a single story, we need to try to be included in the system as well. We need to try to integrate in the system. We might not just want people to hear about our single story without us being integrated in the whole system, trying to know the culture of where we are living in, trying to know the society and people around us. Because you want to be heard, but you are trying to avoid to know where you're living in. You're trying to avoid to know the culture. That's also one of the things that I think migrants or people who want to be heard needs to try to interact more with people, with the whole society at large, just so you are as well known in the society and you know what the culture of Malta is all about, or the society in which you're living in is all about. So thank you for that. Any questions or any?
Yeah, I think Mandy's got her hand up.
Yes,
Oh, okay,
exactly.
yes,
So good
Mandy.
morning, everyone. Hi, Conway. Nice to see you.
Likewise.
So basically, first of all, it was really interesting to hear this panel discussion. I was immediately intrigued to attend because I work at the Ministry for Education and I'm the Education Officer for Lifelong Learning. We provide many courses to many people, all kinds of people, mainly a lot of minority groups, a lot of vulnerable people. Our courses are very cheap or free of charge, so we reach out to everyone. And you know, hearing Dali speak, that's a very good space where people get to interact and socialize together. But I was initially intrigued to join. Now I've learned much more, because we are actually embarking on creating a media literacy program. And this is obviously very much in line with what everyone was saying when you were talking about how can we eradicate the single story, and education was mentioned like quite frequently. So maybe we can even later on collaborate and talk about it further, because we're still on starting the process of writing the program. We want to be careful about how to present it, because even the title, I wouldn't go for media literacy. Few people would attend, so I want to embed it, hide it somewhere, so then we can come out with the clear messages you were talking about today. So this is all very interesting. And within education, just to speak broadly about education, my role is mainly within adult education, so that's where I can make a difference. But I know for a fact that in schools there is a curriculum for media literacy, and even in church schools. Obviously, I don't know how much it's helping out or not with all this, but it's definitely present, not as much as we need it, but it's definitely there. It's definitely there in both state and church schools for sure. So that was kind of a bit of an introduction, and hopefully we can talk further on about this, because I'd like to obviously bring into what we're doing all these perspectives as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mandy. Gabriella, do you have anything to add on what Mandy said?
Well, yes, actually I do, and I appreciate to hear what I heard, and that there are steps that in the making to address it from the educational side. And Mandy, please contact me when you can. Looking forward to it. Yeah, we need to create multicultural spaces. That's all what I need to say. And we need to encourage and empower communities to do so. So all what I can say is thank you, Dali, for your very valuable contribution to that. And thank you, Gail, for your thoughtful analysis as well, so. And Mario. So yeah, that's from my end.
Okay, thank you very much, Gabi. Any other questions or any input again from us?
More than a question, I would like to share some thoughts about what we've just heard. From a mundane point of view, we spoke about spaces, we spoke about perception. Claudia mentioned the importance of our multicultural society nowadays. Our society is multicultural. Through personal experience, I feel that our perception is different, even as regards, for example, foreign nationals living in Malta, for example. Looking at the illegal immigrants or the immigrants who come here to work, as we mentioned, from the Philippines, from Pakistan, from India. That's one part of the story. There's another part of a story going on in Malta. I will mention St. Edward's College, for the simple reason that I mentioned my grandsons earlier on. They attend this college here in Malta. And this is certainly a school where in every class there are many foreign students, foreign children belonging to foreign families who are living here in Malta. The perception and the attitude of our children, of Maltese children towards these foreign children has nothing to do with the perception we have of, for example, children of immigrants here in Malta. Completely different. For them, for these Maltese boys, these foreign children are not foreign or Maltese, they are friends, they are their children. They go to their homes, they come to their homes, and they share toys, they share books, they go to each other's parties. You know, from the children's point of view, there's no difference at all between them, between a Maltese boy and a Chinese boy, or between a Maltese boy and an Italian boy. No difference at all. These children speak English, so as do the Maltese children, so they can communicate very, very easily. There's no difference in their minds. To their mind, they don't say, it's not like, for example, I'll take myself, let's speak about myself. Maltese, all Maltese, let's be, maybe, you know, when we look at a foreigner, a tourist, and when we look at an immigrant, it's a complete different perception. For these boys, so for the future generation, or at least for a part of the future generation, there's no difference. For them, it's acceptable. It's part of their life. You know, these children are a part of their life. So, and the children from every nationality, I must add, every nationality. Arabs, Chinese, any nationality, Japanese, any nationality. There's no difference. It makes no difference at all to them what nationality these children are. They are just children, they are just their friends, their colleagues at school, fellow students.
Mariella, you've touched on something which actually, that's the space. And these children are in the space interacting, okay, with the Maltese children. So look how important it is, okay, that the spaces are multicultural for us to not have these differences. So this is where the single story is so important for us to be discussing this morning, with all the challenges that the country has, the challenges of integration, the challenges of inclusion. These are the stories we have to bring out, and the children themselves today for future, and the children today are going to be the history of tomorrow, okay, are going to be showing society that yes, we can live together, yes, we can interact together, yes, that is how it should be. And they feel safe, and the space is interactive. I mean, you brought it out. Why are they comfortable? Because they're included. They're included in the children's space at school.
Yeah,
Exactly.
this transition kind of from one generation to the next is fascinating, because my father's English and my mother's Maltese, and I spent most of my childhood growing up in London, and the attitudes to diversity and multiculturalism and inclusion, whatever, if I compare my English grandfather, his attitude, he was an Edwardian, he was born at the start of the 20th century. His attitude compared to my attitude when I was growing up in a school in South London, we were on different planets in how we viewed the world. And and a lot of what I suppose one of the things that keeps me optimistic is a lot of the things that I hear and see said in Malta kind of remind me of some of the things I used to hear and see my father and my grandfather say when I was a child in London. And my attitude to what they, so I hope that Maltese children are kind of reacting to their parents and grandparents in the way I used to react to my father and grandfather, which is like, what are you talking about? Like, this is just nonsense. So, obviously it's, nowhere's perfect, and there are problems with integration everywhere. And I'm not saying that London's some kind of, whatever, utopia, far from it, of course. But certainly there's, certainly that there was a change in attitude, certainly, amongst my peers at school. So, there is something to be optimistic about, hopefully.
Yeah, thank you very much.
If I may, I think what Mariella, Claudia, and Conway have just highlighted goes to show that the importance of lifelong learning programs. The problem does not start with the kids, and the importance of teaching them critical thinking from a young age so that they don't develop into the kind of adults who need intervention at a later stage because all of a sudden they've decided that this group of people are no longer acceptable to their society. I agree with Mariella. My daughter has, I don't know, about 4 or 5 different nationalities in her classroom. I don't think she realizes, actually. It's not even an issue, it's not, and I only found out when I go to Parents' Day and I see all the other parents there, it doesn't come up, and it shouldn't come up effectively. So there's a gap. There's a gap, because then when they become adults, they are the people we're reading on Facebook now, and the people we're discussing here. So this highlights, I think, the importance of teaching critical thinking at a young age, and how important programs like Mandy's are, and how much need there is for them. In fact, I'm very glad to hear of your program, Mandy. I'm really, really happy to hear about it. So yeah, thanks.
I want to add something. When we have these spaces, and it exists in schools and in university as well, there is a number of different nationalities, ethnic groups and race. We need also to go beyond the point of, that's it. We kind of include each other, and we know each other, and we are not fearful of each other, and we stop there. And we go to create allies, to create support, to kind of interact. If I'm interacting with 5 people in my class, I need spaces where I can interact with more in my institution, for example. And this is, for example, to show that, for example, children of migrant families here, that they are born here, they don't have a nationality, neither of their home, neither of a Maltese one. They don't have the right to a passport. They are entitled to the same status of their father. So if their father don't have a status, they will not have one, or their mother, I'm not sure. So they will not have one. So for example, my child as a Maltese person will travel during Easter and go to see Disneyland, And the other child, when they will come back and tell them about Disneyland, they didn't have anything. So if, for example, I don't support that community, I'm not also supporting that equal treatment and that equal kind of stories of all the children and what they deserve to be living. And the same thing when we speak about university. Why a refugee, an asylum seeker, a European don't have the right to stipend here in Malta, and they need to live here for 5 years to get one. So we need to create also within these spaces, communities that support each other and that advocate for the right of each other.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dali. I don't know, Cynthia, I'm saying Cynthia, please, do you have anything to add or to say on this? I think I'm just giving some few people if they have anything to talk on, and then I'm also going to give Ralusa also if you have anything to add. Sorry that I'm putting you guys on the spot. Though. Cynthia, I saw you left a message on us if you have any contribution also, Cynthia. Your mic is muted.
Yes, I just unmuted it. So hi everyone, I'm Cynthia. I work for AWAS, so Agency for Welfare of Asylum Seekers. Thank you so much for your interventions. Every day I do ask this question of how to gain more visibility, how to change those single stories. So when we saw this project pop up, it was like a really good opportunity. As I said in the chat, basically me and my colleagues who are attending today, we are part of the Migrant Advice Unit. So we work directly with asylum seekers in Malta, and we give information, and we try as well to enhance collaborations with other entities, whether it be institutions or NGOs. So we're always on the lookout for potential communication channels. In the chat, I shared our email address so that maybe we can keep in touch and we can collaborate on this topic. We are always organizing activities, but it is always within the centers, and there is a bit of a lack of mixing people, you know, and we don't always have this great diversity and melting pots. That's what I'm seeing in this multi-society, is that there isn't, people are not usually mixing that much. Even though we live together, we don't really live as one. So yeah, that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think I will give Ralusa to say if she had anything to say, and then I'll give Baldo. I think you left a comment as well if you have anything to say. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your names well.
Cynthia, you may be interested in, we have an activity later on this year included in this project, which is a community engagement activity, a social community engagement activity, which is called Story Cafe. This consists of 8 different story cafes, and I will definitely send an email out to you on that so that you can inform your communities to form part of this, because this will actually not be online, but a physical social space to provide the opportunity to meet, to exchange our stories, to discuss our stories.
Yes, please do. That would be a great opportunity, and we'll share it for sure.
Thank you very much. And then Lucrecia, I think you can have an chance if you have anything to say.
So I'm working for a company that is called Global Mindset Development, and we work around diversity and inclusion and multiculturalism. So we're always interested in collaborating with people who bring their own experience forth and sort of represent all diversities. But I just wanted to thank you for the creating this space and for all the participants and contributions. I really appreciated them. that was it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any other person who has anything to say or any questions or so? If not, then we might just go to our panelists for a summary or a conclusion on this. I think I'll start with Mariela, if you have any conclusion.
Yes, this is the conclusion. The lateral thinker, Edward de Bono, held that through a philosophical approach, one should cultivate an awareness of and preference for out-of-the-box, unexpected solutions to problems. On one of my interviews with Dr. de Bono, he had said that today it is not about cramming our brains with information, but one has to be aware of available sources of information and be able to access and make good use of that information. This leads to a better understanding of what is going on around us, better discussions, more critical thinking, and consequently, better media literacy. When information is complete, stories will unfold and be told. The concept of belonging, which I mentioned earlier on, will open up, and when embraced, will result in happier societies where experiences, knowledge, and culture are shared, creating acceptance and tolerance, rendering all a better existence and a happier life. As Kierkegaard held, life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. Let us, by making better use of information and communication, make our world a better place and our life and that of others a good and happy experience.
Oh, thank you very much for that. That's very, very great of you. And thank you for being part of our panel today. I would also like to call Gail, if you have any conclusive statement to add on this, please.
On the topic, I think I've said everything I wanted to say, but I just wanted to add, I put a link in the chat. Dali's last comment brought this to mind to me. The Malta Humanist Association, we have a scholarship fund for migrant women. So if you guys, anybody working here with migrant women, think that, because Dali mentioned that it is, of course, financially challenging, you think anybody would benefit. I don't know if most of you would know actually Ramon Asa. He used to be a chairperson of the Malta Humanist Association. He passed away 5 years ago, and he was an activist for migrants and also for women's rights in general. So we decided to combine his two passions and in his honor, in his name, offer scholarships. We already have 2 people who are benefiting, but of course the scholarship fund is still open. So if you have any, if you know anybody who would benefit, please feel free to guide them towards it.
Thank you very much, Gail. Thank you for your input as well as a panelist. We really do appreciate your time. I'll go to Dali and then Mario will be the last. Sorry.
As to end, just to say that story is so important. It's not important as the number it can touch. Even if it touched 1 person, it could be a kind of a successful scenario. So we are not aiming to change the whole society with 1 story, or to change 100 people's thoughts directly with 1 story, but it's working both ways. Personally, stories work therapeutically, like it helps to kind of discuss, to take out thoughts and process, and it helps in kind of to ease. It's a kind of a therapy for myself when I create something or when I speak about something, but also it helps me understand the person in front of me, and it helps me when the person in front of me understands me. So it's a very interesting scenario that happens when storytelling is created, when personal stories are told, and it can help in a fascinating way. So any story will help in any form. It will help, and we kind of try to make the most of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dali, for your insight as well on this panel today. So we are fastly rushing out of time. So Mario, please, you have your last word, and then we'll give Gabi to have a closing remark to help close us today for this great project. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have much to add. Thank you for this very interesting conversation. My just point is that the creative works. I think what has emerged in this discussion mostly is that the creative approach, the artistic in the widest sense, to engage with groups, diversity, minorities, whatever works. It just creates the space where people can, as Mariela said, express their innermost self, and we change through that encounter. We all need to grow. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you for this lovely morning.
Thank you very much, Mario. Thank you for your insight as well. And thank you, Conway, who is my colleague, for being part of this. And Claudia, thank you for the opportunity as well for us to have this. I will thank everyone for being here. I haven't seen, I'll just call some names. I think I see Michael Bassi, I see Samira. Thank you for joining. Veronica, thank you for joining. I see Asha, thank you for joining, and some other ones who left as well. Thank you everyone for your time, and I hope we'll have more pleasant and educative time in the future as well. So Gabi, if you have any last word for us, thank you. Your mic is muted, Gabi.
I want to thank all our panelists for responding to my calls to take part and to share and to contribute. And three simple questions have brought forth such an amazing wealth of information and such a rich discussion. And this alone is a lived example of the many stories and the many perceptions and the many thoughts we have in us. So I'm looking forward to this project, how it evolves. And I would like you all also to attend our second part of this project lounge, which will take place on the 19th in the afternoon, where we have very interesting panelists from the area of media and social exploring. We have a global explorer who traveled throughout many countries of this globe, exploring what it means to be humanist and what it means to belong in a place which we outside of the home of birth. So yeah, and then we will have our stakeholder meeting. I might call on some of you to invite you to our stakeholder meeting. And then we have our interactive educational sessions and our story cafes. So please stay tuned. If you like this morning, join us again. We are looking forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. And I'll give a round of applause for myself and for everyone. So thank you for your time, and hope we meet again soon, and hope we have great interactions again. So thank you and have a lovely day, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Mariella, for coming. Bye.
Welcome.